Welcome to the Wealth Embodied podcast. I'm your host, Brianna Faringer, an attorney, spiritual guide, and wealth activator. I'm here to help you align your mindset for abundance and break through any glass ceilings with money. If you're ready to embrace your highest calling, manifest with more ease, and create a life that feels lighter and more aligned, then let's dive in. Hello, welcome to the Wealth Embodied podcast. I'm your host, Brianna Faringer. Thank you for joining me today. I am going to talk about resistance, which is a topic I absolutely love because I was at one point one of the most resistant people probably in the entire world. And I am not today, although it's something that I do have to continually keep working on because it's something that did affect me for so long. And it's something that affects everyone, no matter who you are, no matter how much personal growth work you do in your life, no matter how much you're willing to change, resistance comes up. And I think it's such a fun topic because I don't know, I think it's such an interesting way of our body showing us and our mind uh, a message and really leading us down the path of what may be the most aligned thing for us. Because my belief is when we experience resistance, it's often the very thing that we need to lean into to get us exactly where we need to go. And that is so far from the belief that I held for such a long time because I was so resistant to change. And so I love this topic because I do know it affects everyone and it comes up so much in my practice with clients that I work with. I mean, it's something that happens in people's lives all the time. And like I said, I have worked on not being so resistant to things, but it still comes up, and I have to be really conscious of it to make sure that I'm just being aware of it and not falling back into my old habits of, oh, I just don't want to do this thing, or maybe I just am not willing to try something new. And so using resistance to get to resilience is such an amazing way to change your life. Even just moving through resistance to small things, which we'll talk about. But staying in resilience is what makes everything harder in your life. And that's the thing that I've really learned for myself. And I can see it in clients when they come to me and we're working together is we often want to stay in resistance because it feels safe even when it is a place that we don't want to be. For example, if you're in a place in your life where you're like, I don't like this right now, I don't really want to be here. People will want to change, but they won't actually move through the things that they need to do to get there because they are scared of change. And where you are today can often feel safer than where you're going to be and not knowing what's going to happen in the future, which nobody knows what's going to happen in the future. And so, uh, resistance is so interesting to me because it's something that prevents people from moving on or doing things that they want to do in their life. And it keeps them stuck in the exact same place that they actually don't want to be in. And I don't know. I love this topic so much because of how significantly it affected me for the large majority of my life. I resisted change so much and I didn't realize it. And the thing is, when you start to really look at change, everything is changing around us all the time. But for me, I was making myself believe that things were staying the same because it felt safer for me to be in that place. I had what I would call a chaotic childhood, a childhood where things were not predictable, where I didn't ever know what was going to happen. Again, we don't ever know what's going to happen, but I had a lot of changes. I had a lot of disappointment. I had a lot of things happen that made me feel unsafe. And the result of that was I started to feel like if I can just keep things the same, then everything's going to be okay. And nothing is the same. Things are changing around us all the time, and things never go the way that we plan, or rarely, I should say. It's just that when you don't like change, we will make ourselves believe that things actually are not changing because it's the way that we can feel the most safe. Now I am completely the opposite. I love change and I love recognizing where I'm open to things changing. I love being curious to how my life can change. I love seeing what happens when I stop deciding that I control what's happening all the time. Because when you can do that and you can get open and curious to all of the possibilities, you start to recognize that all of the things that you were afraid of, that you don't even know could possibly happen in your life, are all of the things that you want to happen. That if you stop being so resistant to change, number one, and number two, to thinking that you're the only person that knows the best outcome for yourself, recognizing that you don't know all the answers, that as humans, we can't recognize all of the possibilities and the amazing things that can happen in our lives. And it's only when we decide that we are going to stop being resistant and be open and curious to things coming in that you can really start to see all of the possibilities for yourself. That to me has become very fun. And I'm sure people listening to this will think that that sounds very scary, because a lot of people want to stay in the same place because they're afraid of the unknown. And I have come to find that the unknown is a lot more exciting than anything I could possibly imagine for myself. And I'm excited to see all of the possibilities and the things that can come into my life, because I don't know all of the things that can happen. And I don't dictate the outcomes for everything. The only thing that we have control over are our thoughts, beliefs, and our responses. That's it. Nothing else. What happens around us, people around us, things that are going on, outcomes, we don't control those things. And I think the more you can kind of get around some of those ideas, the easier it can be to get through resistance. But I will say, getting yourself out of a place of resistance, particularly if there's a lot of hard things going on in your life, that is probably one of the biggest hurdles that people will have, because things may feel so unsteady that even though they don't feel good, it feels safer to be here than somewhere else because they're afraid it's going to get worse. And so resistance will keep people locked in patterns that they have been in for a long time, even though they want to change. It keeps them in relationships that they don't want to be in. It keeps them in relationships no longer serving them. It keeps them in jobs that they don't like. It keeps them living in places that they don't want to live in. It keeps people completely stuck. It's like being in cement. When you're not willing to be open to doing anything differently. And by the way, when I'm talking about doing things differently, this is not making major changes in your life. This is being willing to do things differently here and there, baby steps, because even just doing one thing differently can make an enormous change in your life. It's like the domino effect. You may do one very minimal thing in your life that's different, and it may set off a chain of events that completely change your life. And I know because I've had it happen and I see it happen in other people's lives. When we resist what's happening, we use so much energy fighting it than using energy to create something new or allowing new things to come in. And I think about it like swimming upstream. It's a lot harder to do that than to just go with the flow. Resistance is fighting against change, even in the smallest things in our lives, because we're fighting to keep things the same. And this comes up a lot because people are afraid. They're afraid of what their life is going to be. They don't recognize that it can be better. People always think that their life is going to be worse when change comes in, and that's often never true. It's just getting past that initial obstacle of, okay, I can do this. And resistance will happen even with people who are making changes in their lives all the time. I experience resistance a lot, and I'll tell you what would come up for me a lot in my life is I would say no to a lot of things. And I would explain that as being just knowing who I am. As people would ask me if I wanted to do something, or, maybe things were presented to me, and I would automatically have this response of like, no, I'm not doing that. And I started to recognize that that response was me not, first of all, not even being willing to consider something different, because I had already decided for myself that I didn't want to do something. And by the way, just because you don't want to do something one time in your life doesn't mean that later on you may actually change that. So 5 years ago, I may not have liked meditation, which is true. Today, I love it. So recognizing that things change And then second, for me, I'm a decisive person. And so I would often explain away my decisions to say no to things as well. I'm just a decisive person. I know what I do and don't want. That actually wasn't true. I mean, that is somewhat true, but what that was doing was keeping me in the same place because I would say no to things, not recognizing that they were the things that I actually needed to lean into. So we'll say no to things because we feel uncomfortable. People will have this feeling like, oh, I'm not doing that because it makes them feel uncomfortable. But what if you just tried it and saw what happened? It doesn't mean that because you're doing something new, that has to be the thing that you do. So for example, maybe somebody asks me to go to an event I've never been to. If my immediate response is no, I ask myself, why am I resisting this? What is it about this particular thing that I'm wanting to automatically say no to? Is it because it's not the kind of event I normally like? Is it, am I just worried about something specific about the event? Is it the kind of activity I don't like to do? Am I just not wanting to talk to all those people? I mean, it's really about, thinking through what the thing is that somebody's asking you to do and saying, why am I experiencing resistance to this? Because this happens. Like I'll ask people, like I'll ask friends to go do stuff and they're like, no, I don't like yoga or whatever. And it's like, okay, like I get that. I used to not like yoga either, but there's actually so many different types of yoga. And sometimes you might go to a new class and realize that you actually do like it, or maybe it's a different kind of yoga than you've tried before, or maybe you meet somebody in this class that becomes a very important person in your life. Like you don't know what can happen if you just start saying yes to things. And I'm not saying say yes to everything, but what I am saying is people think that changing their lives is about intentionally going out of their way to make enormous changes around things that they think are affecting them, like traumas, relationships, things that make them feel bad. Those are areas where you can experience resistance. But what I find is most people are experiencing resistance in some of the most minimal little things in their life, like a friend asking you to go do something new. Saying yes to doing something new will completely shift the energy in your life, even if you don't like it. Right. So like, I'm just going to go back to my example I was using. If I ask a friend to go to yoga and that person would normally say no, but that person decides, okay, I'm just going to give it a try. Being willing to do something new or different shifts the energy so much that new and different things can start to come into your life. This is what people don't realize. They stay in resistance because they don't want things to be different. Well, they do want things to be different, but they stay in resistance because it feels safe. And then they don't even undertake to do easy things in their life that can shift energy, right? So, like to change your life today, you don't have to go out and make some major move. You could just go to a different coffee shop. It can be that simple. That is a form of moving through resistance. Let's say you go to the same exact coffee shop every day. Maybe tomorrow you just go somewhere new. Why not? Just change it up and see what happens. That is a way of moving through resistance and or allowing things to change in your life so that you can shift energy around it. So resistance is not just to the big things, it's to the little things. It's to all of the things that we're like, I don't want to do that, or I'm used to doing the same thing over and over again, so I'm going to keep doing it because it feels safe. Just doing one new thing, changing your routine, doing something differently when you wake up tomorrow. Let's say you normally work out in the morning. What if you read a book for 5 minutes? I'm just throwing random things out there. Doing things differently makes enormous changes in your life and it helps you move through resistance. And I experience this a lot with clients. So clients will come to me, and of course, they're coming to me because they do want to make changes in their lives. That's already step one. They're taking action to make changes. That's huge. But I'll tell you what will happen is this happens actually a lot is people will come to me and we will have some topic, like maybe a topic will come up that is something that the person needs to work on. I'm gonna use people pleasing for an example because I actually had this with a client and I remember it so well because of how resistant this person was. So people pleasing is actually something that really affects people's ability to get what they want in life, including money. And so one thing I was talking with a client about was people pleasing, and she had traditionally been a people pleaser. And it was interesting because it came up in her session and her response was so quick. I brought up people pleasing and her response was so quick. And she was like, I've already been working on that. And so if you just kind of, like, I'm going to say it again, I've already been working on that because I want you to feel the energy that's behind that. There was this, she had such a response to it. It was like, I'm not doing that anymore. Right. So I think what had happened, I didn't dig into it with her, but I immediately was like, oh, okay, this is a hot spot, right? Because we will decide for ourselves, like if something has come up in our lives and we've worked on it, we will create a scenario in our minds where we're like, I've already done enough of that. I don't need to work on it anymore. Like that's healed enough. And what will keep happening is those scenarios will continue to come up in our lives because it's something that we have to keep working on forever. No, nothing is ever truly fully healed. And I'm sure people will disagree with me on that, but I've had lots of things in my life that I have done an enormous amount of work on and affect me very little, but they still pop up here and there. And it's a reminder for me to say, oh, Brianna, this is coming up again. Don't forget, these things are going to be coming back up in your life so that you can respond differently to them. And so I knew immediately this client had decided that she had already worked on people pleasing enough. Maybe she was just sick of working on it. I don't know what it was, but she was very like, I'm not doing that. And I will have that come up. People will say, like, oh, I'm already doing that, or I've already done that. Great. That's great if you've already been working on those things. It's going to keep coming back up in your life. It's going to keep reappearing. And the more resistance you have to it, the more it's going to continue to affect you. And so that's another area of resistance that I see a lot is people thinking something is healed or people deciding, oh, I've already done enough work on that. I'm like, I need to move on to something else. And my experience for myself is that the more I think I've healed something, the more it will continue to come back in as a reminder for me to be humbled. It's like, oh no, that thing's not done. You always have to be aware of it. And I always say this, like it's not about, I don't know, being overly confident, but I will say any area in your life where you're like so confident, you're like, oh, I've got that down. Something is going to come back that's going to humble you. And it's not like that's not a punishment. That's not a, oh, hey, you thought you had this and you don't. It's just that things continue to present themselves in our lives so that we can respond differently. To me, I think it's fun now. I used to be really irritated by it because I'm like, oh, this thing is coming back up again, and I would have resistance to it. But the more things come up, the more I'm like, oh, okay, this gives me an opportunity to do something differently. Cool. I love it. And I get the same information over and over again about working things that I need to keep working on. And there are things that I've been working on for a long time, but I just have to say to myself, okay, Brianna, don't be resistant to working on this. Just look at it from a different perspective. Like, what were you doing before, and how can you look at this differently so that you can just do something differently? Just respond differently to this kind of thing, or look at it from a different perspective. Or is there another way that you can attack it? Because that to me is part of the fun, is just figuring out how can I do things differently so that when this does come up in my life again, I'm not feeling so resistant to it. And one thing I want to talk about with resistance is I think a lot of people think that I like if there's something happening in their lives that they don't maybe that they don't like and they're feeling very resistant either to the thing happening or to something changing or maybe a situation presenting itself to that person in a way that it needs to change. They believe that if they accept it, that it's like they're agreeing to the thing happening in their life. And I want to point out that just simply accepting what is happening in your life does not mean you agree with it. You cannot like something that's happening in your life and still say, okay, I don't like this, but I'm going to move through this so that I can get to the other side. I'm going to be open to making changes. I'm going to stop being resistant because a lot of times I think people have this belief and it's subconscious a lot of times that people don't even realize that they're doing this. They think that by agreeing to move through resistance of something in their life that they're accepting or excuse me, that they are agreeing that whatever is happening is okay. And this will come up with maybe events that they don't like. Let's just say a person lost a relationship or something, and it's clear that they need to start doing things to move on from that. M- Making changes in your life to move on from a relationship does not mean that you agree that it ended. It just means that you're agreeing that you need to move through whatever is happening so that you can make changes in your life. But that's another place that people keep themselves stuck. It's like they think that because they're they're accepting what is for the purpose of being able to make changes in their life, that somehow it's okay. And two things can be true at once. You can not want something to have happened in your life and still say, okay, I'm willing to accept it and move through whatever resistance is coming up around it so that I can make changes. And that's kind of a broader topic than I can go into for, the purposes of this podcast, but I just point that out because it's another place where it keeps people feeling very safe. They don't want to accept something, and so they will keep themselves in the exact same place because they think that acceptance means that they're agreeing that it's okay, and it's not. And I can't give you a concrete example off the top of my head other than the one I just gave you, like, in terms of a relationship, but people think that when things happen in their life that they don't want, that they have to agree to them to be able to move on. No, you don't. You can disagree with something having happened and not like it and still say, okay, I am willing to move through the resistance I have around this to make my life better or make my life different. But resistance is going to come up all the time. No matter how healed you think you are, no matter how much work you do on yourself, it's going to come up. It comes up for me all the time. And even right now, I am experiencing an enormous amount of resistance to doing certain forms of exercise that I used to love doing. And I have been going through this, this, I've had to really to sit with it and ask myself why I'm having resistance to it and what are the beliefs I have around exercise that are preventing me from being to exercise. I never had a problem with exercise in my entire life. And lately, my beliefs around what exercise is has changed because for years, I believed that it was only true exercise if it was like cardio and weightlifting. And the reality is, I much prefer other things that are not as high intensity. But I'm working on shifting my beliefs around what I think true exercise is, because it's one of the things I'm experiencing and being able to get myself to exercise and do the kind of exercise I want to do, which is not high intensity, which is not heavy cardio, which is not heavy weightlifting. It's more low intensity type things. And the thing I also discovered when I was kind of looking in my resistance around it is I have a belief that you have to exercise for a certain amount of time. You can exercise for 5 minutes. But I have it in my mind that there has to be like at least a certain amount of cardio and at least a certain amount of lifting, and that you have to be sweating and that you have to be feeling like you're almost going to fall over, because that's the way I worked out for the large majority of my life. And so resistance comes up all the time. It's just being aware of, why am I resisting this thing? And starting to figure out what is it going to take for you to get over your, for lack of a better word, or, acronym BS. What's it going to take for you to get over your own BS? And I have to say that to myself. I'm like, it's just exercise, Brianna. What is it going to take for you to get over your own BS with this? It's not a big deal. And I, encourage you to ask yourself that question. What's it going to take for me to get over my own BS? Because a lot of times the things that we're trying to move through are not that big of a deal. It's just exercise. It's just doing something a little bit differently. It's just being willing to change what we have been used to doing so that we can allow energy to move. Because when you allow energy to move, it flows to you in a way that is effortless and easy, specifically with money. And so the less resistance you have to making changes with everything in your life, the less resistance you're going to have to letting money come in. So I hope this was a great episode for you and that you found some useful tips. I hope you have an amazing day. Thank you for tuning in. Bye. Hey, before you go, would you love to receive my 3-step masterclass to easily create and hold wealth for free? It's called Effortless Money, and it includes the exact framework to start attracting money effortlessly and manifesting abundance with more ease. If you want it for free, all you have to do is leave an honest review of the Wealth Embodied podcast, Take a screenshot of this episode and put it in your Instagram stories and tag me at Brianna_Faringer, and we will send you the free Effortless Money Masterclass. This is how my clients have manifested a $13,000 check, a promotion resulting in a $30,000 salary increase, and significantly improved relationships. All right, guys, I hope you enjoyed this episode, and I'll see you next time on the Wealth Embodied podcast.